to begin, you sent me this article by Liz Pelly, who's followed the inner workings of Spotify for the past few years. And her book is coming out in January, but the article in Harper's was sort of a short prelude to the book, and I think also a sort of a summary of what is happening in the industry. I wanted to know for you what your thoughts were after reading that piece. I mean, obviously it has been discussed a lot. On the other hand, I think for you, someone like you, I think we've talked about this long before this article came out. It was clear to me, and I suppose to you as well, that something like this was going on for a long time. Still, the response was pretty strong. So I was just curious what you thought after reading it and moving forward.
To be quite honest, like with that kind of thing, it's very hard for me not to zone out while reading it.
Yeah.
So I would not say that I could even remember all the points that were made, because as you say, everything was just sort of like obvious that was going on, and yes, it kind of leaves me and everybody speechless in a way. But in a way, it does not leave me speechless, because it's totally understandable that people who are like business orientated would do that. So that's why I said jokingly on Facebook to responding to David Rothenberg, who had posted that article. I wrote, okay, let's buy Spotify stock, right? And it was only like tongue in cheek, half jokingly. Really, why not? I mean, that's the ridiculous thing. Like maybe you buy stocks for $500 or euros, and you will make more money in 3 months than you will ever make as an artist on Spotify.
Yes.
So I think that's sort of like the methods that the music business has employed for the last 25 years. Once they noticed that there was, I mean, I don't know exactly, but obviously once the Napster thing hit, it was obvious that they needed to find other ways. And so you basically insert yourself on the other end, where you're exploiting, well, how should I say this? The niches, right? Like both legally as well as geographically, I think is also important. Like we never talk about that much. And also like within the customer group on both ends, so the people who consume and the people who make. So trying to make money from the trenches. And I've spoken a lot about crowdfunding portals being the most evil thing, and that's also like trying to make money off beggars, and that's what the whole system is set about to do. And now with the ability to create artificial, in inverted commas, content, this is the total exploitation of what initially was, built on people's love for music, or you could say even people's love for culture. That's kind of like, I don't want to say that's all I can say, but that's all I can say now.
Yeah, I think apart from the investigative portion of it, which essentially comes down to the realization that Spotify is strongly pushing towards a situation where a large part of what is consumed as audio products on the site, and I'm using that word specifically, not calling it music, because I think that's one thing we can talk about later. I don't think this is actually music anymore.
That is true, but I think we have to call it music.
Because it is consumed as such.
Yes.
Yes, I agree. Okay, we can. I don't mind. We can call it music, but what is consumed as music on that site is created for very specific. There's sort of what is called functional music, I think, or functional function-specific music. So that is the investigative part. That there is a program inside that company which creates these products, which creates this music, and which then channels it into a system where it is sold as though it is just any regular piece of music. Like you can put it side by side with the way music has been made for the last 100, 200 years since the beginning of recorded music.
You know, it's just so evil. So that's why I said like it's for me it's mostly about zoning out, but it's so evil. Like since 2024, Spotify does only pay for tracks that are streamed more than 1,000 times. Okay, so that means I don't know, billions and billions probably of money that they keep.
Yes.
Okay. Also, I mean, like, I'm pretty sure that they don't care if they train their AI on the tracks that have less than 1,000 plays. So because they do. So they see the evil aspect of this. So on one hand, they take away the mass, which is like the mass, the biggest chunk of pieces is not being played more than 1,000 times. So that means they can train their model. They know exactly what works and what doesn't work. But I think for the training of the models, that doesn't even matter. So because they will be able to provide anything.
Exactly.
Yeah, and they have all the metadata. So with the metadata and the data itself, there is really like no end in sight as in what they can accomplish in generating, obviously endless variations. Yeah.
I think for me, I mean, obviously, as you say, this is evil. It's really bad, and it's really coming from top down because, as I think Pelly herself describes, many of the employees are actually music fans, and they strongly dislike the policy. But to me, one thing that is interesting is that these playlists of functional music or music created to fit specific situations, occasions, moods, etc., clearly work. And maybe in some respects, they're better suited to these purposes. I wonder just that whether the fact that they actually work tells us something about what the listener or listeners want out of music, which would be really interesting for musicians to understand. I mean, I think to me
But it's not that easy. Okay, so as always with these kinds of subjects, the origin is the education, right? So what I'm saying is like there's an aspect about like what audience are we talking about? So when you say like these playlists clearly work, I wonder, the question we have to ask ourselves, who do they work for?
Yes.
Right? And that is like we would have to understand and I think that's actually the case, that within the time of existence of Spotify, for example, the audience has been trained. That's what I mean with education or educated, has been trained to listen in a new certain way, like not necessarily new, but like with the convenience of being able to listen like that, one track, not an album. it's like the radio. If you pay, you don't have the ads, and you don't really know who is curating. Yes, you still have the option to create your own playlists, and people do that, but then that is data that can be used to train the AIs, or it used to be called the algorithm, remember? And so like the question is really like, who does it work for? And isn't it all like, do we really need to talk about these things if we don't have the power anymore to educate or train the people to listen to the, let's just call it, real thing? Okay, so that's why, again, like I'm zoning out so easily on these topics, because like we don't even know which kind of leverage we still have.
I agree. And by the way, that's one of the things I want to talk about in this new podcast series I plan on making. I think there actually maybe the situation is better than most musicians would believe, but maybe I'm seeing it because I'm not in that situation. I'm in a different one. Although mine isn't better. I mean, I think maybe to give you an example of when I say it works, then let me give you an example from the world of journalism. I wrote an article for Beat magazine about the sort of mainstream and underground culture, I believe it was basically. And so the title of that article was "Everybody Loves Ed Sheeran," which was a quote by someone who had said that, and which was clearly not meant seriously. So it was in the article. So I used that as an example to underline the way many people think, and that's also maybe an education thing. But so it was posted on the Facebook account of Beat with that title, and then people merely commented, "No, I don't like Ed Sheeran." So that was the gist of the discussion. So that title worked. So I picked the right title in the sense of getting people's attention, but people don't actually click forward. So the title is the content. And I think that's something I observe all the time. And we spoke about Anil in interviews. I think he really is really good at picking great quotes from his interviews. But then very often people don't click to the actual content.
Yeah, and that's yeah.
And so I think
that's what I meant. That's what most people have been trained to do these days, is to skim the surface of media.
Even though I think my conclusion is that in the past, I think it was an illusion to believe, and maybe it's for me as a journalist, to believe that other people would actually read these articles like they would actually read them. I think I think a lot of like music criticism, a lot of it was just so people would read a critique, which was maybe really extremely well written, which could be really in depth, but they would really just have an idea of what the music sounded like. Now they just go to a streaming service to listen to it, and that's it. I think the functional aspect of even a great review was probably more important than the writing and the analysis very often. I agree that, of course, for those looking...
Don't forget that, like image is everything, right? So, and this is something that has been sort of like when we talk about image, we talk about cult of personality, really, but what it really means, image is everything. Image is what we imagine when we're confronted with a stimulus, right? So there's a certain stimulus, and we have this idea about it. We imagine things. So you see a picture, you see a photograph or whatever, and you have certain associations. You read few words in a headline. You don't necessarily even read the whole thing. It never, like, the image is so much more than the real content. So in cases of like us, in our cases, we care about the content, we care about the art, about the writing, about the music. And we wrongly believe that everybody else is just like us. And this is like generally like the tragedy of human beings is that we think that others are like us. And now with these malleable forms of media, it is really nothing is what it seems anymore. Or you could say everything is what it seems, but it is not what it is. And that is like the big problem. And it means and seems something slightly different for everybody. So there's no such thing as I have, like I said, I have read the article, but I zoned out so many times that I can't even say I've read the whole article, and I'm honest about it. But a lot of people would not even be honest about it. You could see that in commentary and social media, where people, as you said, they only comment on the title, or they haven't even read the article, haven't even read the title properly, etc., or haven't even checked what the context of the an utterance is.
Yeah.
Right?
I suppose what you just before said about finding niches, right? I think I think the way you describe also about the new rule or the new inner so this policy of only rewarding tracks which garner more than 1,000 plays. I think that's sort of the evil end of the long tail, right? It's so I think in the 80s and 90s you had these big idea, the big idea art, because, or 70s, we had the big idea art because I think I totally agree with this idea that we're looking at the image. I would maybe call it an ideal. I think you have an inner ideal of something, and then you find something in the outer world that matches that ideal as closely as possible. And in the 80s, 90s,
You know what? I wouldn't call it ideal. You can drop the L.
or maybe yes, maybe yeah,
It's just an idea.
yeah. And
Sorry, but yeah,
no,
go
sure,
on.
no, I agree. And then you look for what something resembles or approximates that idea or ideal or as closely as possible. And now, once we start, we have these statistical tools at our disposition, and we actually know what people have as their inner idea. We can tailor make the music for them. And the fact that we only reward them, like even at a higher scale, the rewards are minimum, which a company like Spotify has to pay out. But on the low end, it's nothing, and then they actually keep it, so they can make music which fits very specific ideas of people. But we no longer get to share it with others because we don't have. I think part of the discourse which we love so much is exchanging our thoughts about those ideas with others. Like your idea of even someone like Mike Oldfield, whom we both are, like his music are really into it about, there's still like parts of his discography where we can go into disagreement, or we can, like some people say something that will say, oh wow, that's true. I never actually thought about it that way. And part of the pleasure of the music is the fact that it means different things to different people. But once we now can zoom in on something that is ultra specific, there is no need for actually this debating it anymore. I think if it's tailor-made for you, if it fits your inner idea exactly, then it will not fit anyone else's exactly, very likely, or just very few people. But there's no need for the discourse, because if something fits like a glove, like if you have found the perfect pair of sneakers, there's no need to keep searching.
Yeah, I mean the words commodity, like, or even like this idea of like a music as furniture, or ambient music, as in, exactly kind of like fulfilling that that moment where it's like you use the word functional. I find that functional, originally programmatic music.
Yes.
That's what it was called when somebody would write a piece about the Moldau, right? Like that was programmatic music.
Yeah.
The the issue is really that, and I mean, like, yeah, I think it's sort of the shortest path to success is to sell more of the same, because in a way, like it could be possible that real artificial intelligence, we use the funny construction, real artificial intelligence may be able to make suggestions. Say you buy books from Amazon, right? What they used to do is they sold you more of the same books, that because they could extract patterns from from the from the actively made decision, let's say, but they have no idea about the negative space. So what does it mean? Like, which books does this person not buy, right? And like, if you go and say, you back in the day you would go to through somebody's record collection or a bookshelf, you would kind of like tend to the books that you have not heard of before, that sort of like surprise you, or so they kind of like exist at least partly in that negative space, right? And the way that the algorithms used to work, because I think that with like there's a new generation, obviously, of these algorithms, or what people call AI these days, that may be able to embrace more of that negative space again, in order to also make more money from those people. I think that's what I mean. Like a certain technique, like the algorithms on like any of these sites, they never worked for me. Like Spotify was just horrendous what kind of ads it would play to me.
Yeah.
Like the summer hits, then blah blah blah, while I was listening to David Sylvian exclusively, let's say, right? So really ridiculous kind of like combos, because they don't know about the negative space. And that may change, and that will be another trench, let's say, and another niche that they will learn to explore and to make money from, which in the end may be, you could say, may be a good thing, because you are seeing more and hearing more, or whatever, potentially. But then, and this is like what we set out with at the beginning, now the content is not being created anymore by people, but by the company, by the shell, let's say. The shell also creates its content.
Yeah.
And that means that it's a system that's closed within itself, where it's a pure money-making machine, like yes, and as long as, like, like some sort of currency needs to go into it. And that is really, I think, obviously people who buy subscriptions, sure, advertisers, and also attention, like what they call the attention economy. And how that's exactly being utilized is really yeah, I don't know much about that, but there is like just like a whole nested process of exploiting yeah, these behaviors, we could say, right? We're talking about human behavior, and as I also said, like there are still being like these new niches and trenches uncovered that can be exploited.
I wonder how we know that as always, there were examples of similar ideas being explored by humans for humans, not just by humans using machines to create something for humans. I just wonder, how different is it from having a boy group or a girl group produced or thought up by industry executives who they will then go to a
Frank Farian.
Frank Farian. I was thinking about Milli Vanilli. Yeah.
Yeah, Milli Vanilli or Boney M even 10 years earlier.
So what is the difference then? If we take,
There's no difference. That's what I'm saying. It's just a continuation, and in the music industry itself sort of like is initially evil. Like, and this is everybody knows that original contract, let's say, was to sign away your rights, and then the record company was able to make as many endless amount of copies of your performance, right? And that's the evil part of it. And it's only been like we're still in the process of permutating and iterating these ideas of exploitation of a creative act, let's say. It's as simple as that. There's nothing new about it. Also, like, the machine wouldn't be interested in creating music, because like the machine doesn't need to consume music. It can. The funny thing is, it can consume. It's all there, so it doesn't have any value. And even if the machine would have feelings like a human being, it would never have the socialization of having an interest in that music, because it's all readily available. So this is like another kind of like shortcoming in how people think about like generalized artificial intelligence, or artificial generalized intelligence, I think I call it these days, is really it's kind of difficult to think how you would have to transfer human traits into the machine in order for it to actually do the things that we consider to be generally intelligent, right? So yeah, I mean, does that make sense? I mean, there's just, I think it's just the why would you create artificial music? Like, let's say, as a the way that normally, usually, a business was run is that, say you are a farmer, and you have, let's say you have 15 employees, small farm, yeah? And the aim would be that you, as the farmer, can survive, as in, feed your family, pay your employees, like, like you need to have that whole system like running, let's say. Only when like something like the idea of profit comes into play, things get out of hand, right? And that's what's happening with, like, if like Spotify. I mean, like, the thing, like the shell itself is kind of neutral. Okay, it could be a system that delivers music to people who want to listen to music, and it would pay out money to those who make the music. But that's not the interest of that company. The interest of that company is profit, and I say of the company, not of the company. Company doesn't have any interests. It's the people running it, and like, it's only this guy Daniel, I think, or Daniel, which is his name. I have no idea who he is. I don't even know if he is the main driver of this. But that's why we have that situation. It's because of people. It's not because of technology.
No, I agree.
So, and that's something we need to also understand.
The machines are not evil. I don't think
No, I mean, like, how could that be?
Exactly.
That's yeah. As an extension of a human being. So this is why it's a cybernetic organism. The idea of cyborgs, like, it's not like, okay, yeah, you have a pacemaker or something. Okay, yeah, you could call, but the real cyborgs are the ones that are interfacing their ideas of profit with the machine. And that's what we see all over the place.
Yeah. I think for me, what I take from it, and that's maybe going back to what I was saying earlier, is that I think, of course, artists want, no, that's too general a statement, but when once you release something to the world, you no longer have control over what people get out of it. And I think there's very often a misunderstanding on the artist side of what listeners get out of it. And sometimes it's very little, like a small part of what you're creating is what they take from it. And maybe it's something that's unintentional. I was thinking about this idea that they did some the speculation why Billie Eilish's first album was so successful. And you actually, if you look online, you find plenty of people who say that my album is broken, the bass frequencies are too heavy, it distorts. But actually that's intentional. And so the idea that, so one suggestion why the album works so well is that the bass is so heavy and so deep that it actually creates this sort of a blanket effect. It actually pushes into the body if you listen to it on a high enough volume. And so it actually comforts you. People calm down by listening to it because the bass is so strong. It's not a new idea, but I think it's on this album it's particularly poignant because it's so overemphasized in contrast to the rest of the music. So I'm thinking that I actually think that sound can change the world because we respond to sound very strongly because it's so physical. And but I can also see the exploitation potential if you isolate that bass from the music, maybe it is even more effective in treating certain symptoms like depression or feeling of loneliness, etc., which opens up this functional space. So I think a big problem is that on a platform like Spotify, they're treated like equals. They're, as you said, they're consumed like music. It's just not, I don't think it's music. It's not the same thing to even debate it in the same context is
I think
wrong.
I think that we shouldn't even like really, you know, like we don't really know what's going on in somebody else's mind, okay? And I'm just talking about like your neighbor, like, or like I have no idea what's going
Yeah.
on within you. Like we believe that we have that we're sharing something, but we don't know. Like we may be listening or looking at the same thing and see something completely different, and there's no way of finding out. So that's why I see, like, as a musician, I can tell you that I have absolutely no idea what the people see or hear or experience, right? Feel. Like it's really, there's absolutely no way. Most obviously in live performance, like you could be having a shitty day, playing a shitty show, let's say, many mistakes, for example, and people would come and say, I love it, this was the best concert I've ever seen in my life. And I say, okay, great, right? I believe you, you know, because like your world has nothing to do with mine. And that is an insight that is sad. You could say sad, but it's also important that if we understand that that's how the world is, then we can have a completely different look at the world. We realize that what we kind of like, you know, like put on top of things, let's say, in terms of our psychology, let's say, is really not important or doesn't really matter for the experience of somebody else. Like like many, like in my view, something strange or ridiculous or even like the questions that I get about my music, where people ask, what's the difference between this and that? And I say like, okay, you don't hear the difference. Like you're asking me what the difference is, but you are the one listening. It's strange, right? But like but then like not to think of that as something that is awkward. I mean, even though it may feel awkward in the moment, but to understand that's the way things work. Like what I hear, what I know, you will never hear and you will never know.
Yeah. On a side note, I think it's kind of funny that when you say we all think differently, we cannot know what the other things. I could say the exact same thing because I actually believe it's the exact same thing, but maybe we actually mean different things.
Yeah, of
That
course.
could also
Of
be.
course.
Would you like, as a thought experiment, if someone would be able to conduct research on, and he would say, I will play your music. I have the funds. I will play your music to 100,000 people, and they will all be asked questions afterwards on different aspects of their listening experience, and it would be a really well done questionnaire, etc., etc. Would you be interested in the results of this, and would that be interesting for you the way you create music in the future? If you were to know
No, I mean, like for me to create music in the future, no, it wouldn't have an influence because I wouldn't know how to change. That's why, like, this is sort of like another situation that so me as a creator of sound, let's say, is facing is I do what I do, and I do it because I do it. It's like somebody can criticize me. Like there was like a horrible review of my work. Horrible, like really, really personally insulting. And it was ridiculous because like the person was saying, like, so either he's a genius or he's just repeating himself. And so those were the two choices. And then he said, but he's not a genius.
I was going to say he's definitely repeating himself. So
and it was really interesting. Like even if I would, and I do take it seriously, as in I understand what you mean. Of course, I'm repeating myself because I am who I am, and I'm doing the things that I do. But what gives you like there must be something about my work that gives that guy actual emotions, right? So it's interesting, like but what do I do with that kind of information? I'm a very sensitive person, so like if somebody says that, it hurts me. I admit that it does hurt me. How can I like positively make that have that influence my work? I don't see how. I don't see how. Like it just means, okay, I have to get over that hurt, forget about that person, feel aggression about that person, let's say, and then I get over it. But coming back to your question, okay, like have 10,000 people like have a questionnaire about my music. In a way, it happened to me at the start of Pandora.com, where that's what they said, that people were rating the music. And one of my tracks got into the heavy rotation, and it's still being played a lot on Pandora.com.
And that one has been 10 million times or something?
No, I mean, it was about 5 million a year for a few years before they were keeping their stats.
Yeah.
Right now, like with their stats, it's still I'm still at around 30 million now. I don't know how old the stats are, like maybe the last 10 years or something. So it slowed down, but in the beginning it was shockingly, a lot of plays really.
Yeah.
So you see, like that was an example where a process like that led to something of mine actually be accepted in the sense of being consumed, and again, probably with Pandora.com, not actively consumed, because also I've never, with one exception, there's one person that has discovered my music on Pandora.com that I used to communicate with later, but has been not a single sale, let's say, that I can contribute to people listening on Pandora. So you see, and that's the thing. That's the thing about, if we want to return to, and let's just say the word Spotify again, because we'll keep promoting that shitty thing. But we have to use it as sort of like it's like the example of what's going on. Music industry has always been, how do you say, the pioneering technology.
Yeah.
And what we see in the music industry is and will happen in every other industry.
I think what is possible will happen, simply. And I think I actually don't think that what's happening inside of Spotify is necessarily indicative of the industry as a whole, because Spotify is based in Sweden, and the infrastructure was there for this to take place. It was simply that they have extremely well-educated musicians. They have the money and the companies ready to provide these services and products. And so
You see, it's really like another example. So even 5 years ago, let's say 5, 10 years ago, for the regular person, it was impossible to invest money yourself. You had to go to a broker that usually was your bank. Now we have apps that like broker apps, right? Where you can dabble in the stock market by yourself. So now you say, okay, how is that possible? And suddenly, like, potentially they open the market to billions of people to actually, so to work with that material, with that content, right?
Yeah.
So it is the people higher up on the ladder that have discovered this niche, so we can sell the idiot, like who doesn't know how to do this. They will lose money, and we will take our percentage of that. That's exactly what that business model is doing. It's the exact same thing as crowdfunding, as what again Spotify does. It's exactly, they're exploiting the fringes, or like what I call the trenches or the niches of the market, to actually draw every single bit of money out of the psychological condition of humans, of the human being per se. And that is something that needs to be very clear about us, and for us, that's what's always been happening. If you're selling somebody a car, an expensive car, like, why would you sell an expensive car to somebody? Why? Because there's a financial gain in it for the person selling the car, not for the person, like paying off the car for 15 years or whatever, right? So it's really, there's nothing surprising about what's going on in the music industry, and with AI, that the content is going to get replaced. So the artist will be less and less important in that context, you could say. I think it's going to lead, and I'm actually seeing it with generated images already, that the let's just say, in order to generate images that have artistic or value, an artist needs to make those images. It's very simple. An artist needs to prompt, needs to choose, needs to get into an iterative process. So now, and this is like sort of like the next stage, and this is something that so far, as I can tell, the industry hasn't been interested in. What they would need to do is they would need to start modeling artists. What they're still trying to do is to kind of to model the result from the content itself.
Yeah.
And this is gonna work for a while, but people get tired of that shit easily. And I think that this time frame of fatigue of that kind of content is going to get shorter and shorter. So let's say like the images generated with Midjourney 2 years ago, they had a certain charm because it was kind of like still faulty in a way, and generated some interesting artistic results if you, as a viewer, as a human viewer, chose those images. So you're curating. Same is going to happen with music, right? So that it needs to get curated somehow. Okay, so the next step is now for these algorithms to model the artists themselves, right? And then that's going to get old too. And this is something I'm kind of looking forward to in a way, because that will be the moment where the emancipation of the human creativity, let's say, will start happening. When the artistic part, the creative part of the human has been modeled, which, I mean, interesting. I was contacted by an AI researcher, and we're gonna do a project together. And like in our talks, we arrived at this point, at this, aim to actually model the composer, the music composer, rather than the output. And but anyway, like what I'm saying is like that's gonna get old too.
Yeah, exactly. So what you're describing is actually one step further from that. It's
Yes.
yeah.
That's gonna get old too. That's gonna get boring and tiring, and people, we could say, oh, if they still exist, if we still exist as human beings, or if we still have flesh and blood or whatever, at that point, there's gonna be something. Something's gonna come back. That's how I see it. Something that humans have been doing is gonna come back. There's a certain kind of community, a certain kind of life that's going to come back. Something that we haven't been doing for probably hundreds of years is going to somehow come back. We don't really know what it is. It could be like something negative, like any dystopian kind of thing, like diseases, decimation of the human race, like wars or like whatever. Like it could go that way, or it could go in the direction, or in like a combination of things where like there's a different focus again. Like life is only about just mere existence, without any drive to discover anything new anymore. Like the actual brain function, like we assign like everything to the brain, like in so the brain function would be continuous, would be going down. Like it's not about self-actualization anymore. It's just about going and finding worms that you can eat, or like I think that something like that is gonna eventually happen. And like at that point, like will the machines take over? I don't think so, because at that point, there's nobody interested in doing the exploitation that the machines were doing.
Yeah, maybe that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many scenarios, and like hundreds, I'm sure, of sci-fi writers have kind of like chewed this through
I
many
don't think
times.
so. Not for music, but
Well, not for music, but like in general, like these are not new things that I don't know. Hu- Maybe humans like a few thousand years ago have already thought through this scenario. I'm sure. I'm absolutely sure that this is nothing new, and that somehow we will return to something. We will return to some sort of original way of being. That's kind of like what I believe.
it's I probably this is a pretty realistic future scenario, and I like the idea that you call it the evolution of human creativity, because maybe it's not just going back, but maybe it's actually going into a different direction. To me, I think music has sort of always been a way to understand myself. I think far less than images, because images take up a space which I could use to actually look inside myself. I think they block my understanding, whereas music creates a projection of something that's inside. And I've often wondered where these projections come from, and why they tell me something about myself.
Well, that's also like again part of this misunderstanding. Like just the reason that the fact that you think you want these kind of experience, or this deeper insight into yourself, or whatever. Like you can believe me that there are not that many people that want the same.
Probably.
Because we are all different.
Yeah.
So that's why, like I see that as a teacher, like thinking that I'm kind of like passing on a certain knowledge, let's say, and I realize some people simply don't want it. They want something else. I don't know what that something else is, so that means I can either push giving them what I can give, or I just give up and do not give them, do not try to give them something that they don't want. And
But what do you think if you create music and then play that music to someone, or they just play it if it's recorded, what happens in sort of transmission? What is anything transmitted? Is it just something you create and that creates some?
nothing is transmitted. There's nothing that's transmitted. It's just a trigger, right? The music is a trigger. It triggers something in the person, but that what is being triggered has nothing to do, is not being transmitted from me to them, or it's not even transmitted from the music. It really is literally, it's just a push button.
So but what if like you have a billion streams of watermelon sugar, and everyone who listens to that song said it makes me feel happy?
What is that?
It's one of the most widely streamed songs.
Okay.
Watermelon Sugar,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's called. So it's just a happy, good, like, well, let's just say it's a tune which is often played in summertime. And so if everyone who listens to that song said it makes me happy, does that not tell us that the experience must be
Universal.
almost universal? Yes.
No, it's, I mean, it's that is a cultural or social phenomenon. Right? It's not the music that is happy. It's that people agree. And it's not that they agree in the first place that this is happy or making them happy. It's something that happens to make them happy because they decide that that's what it means. So it's not in the music. It is pushing buttons in a few people, and they that's like how the world works. Like, how do we know that this here on the table is a pair of glasses, right? Or this is
I was going
a
to say the word
Murakami book, or like, like there's needs to be a certain an agreement needs to be made, and the agreement, like in different spiritual set of teachings, like it's being described in different ways. I really like the Carlos Castaneda way of describing it, that like we are light beings, where there are like strings between us with which we can make agreements. So we agree that we interpret that pattern as a coffee cup, right? So, but there needs to be a connection between the beings, let's say, or the bundles of light. That's like how Castaneda writes it. So it means like there is no such thing as a you and I. We're all one thing. It's just that there's more density in one place, let's say. And so there's more density where I am, there's more density where you are, but still we're one thing and we're connected. And via this connection, we can make agreements. So we can experience ourselves as an entity that's separate from the other entity, but we have a connection that makes us or allows us to agree. And when you're talking about this watermelon song, to create happiness in people, it is because the beings, the densities, let's say, right, within the mass have agreed on that. And they have agreed on that via the experience and passing on of that experience. So it's not, and I mean that's something that we all have experienced, in when we were younger, so 70s, 80s, right, where you hear something for the first time, and it triggers something in you, and you have a certain interpretation, let's say, of that trigger. right? And then you talk about somebody. So you're making that connection. You have that connection to the next bundle of light, and you're transferring that agreement by sharing, right? And that's how it works with music as well. And especially in this case where you say it's billions and billions and billions, like originally we were this information was transferred, this agreement was made by talking to each other. But now this agreement is being made by the algorithm showing you or bringing the track up in a playlist. So the machine has long been part of the interbeing communication, let's say, by inserting itself into this communication process. And that's what what the internet is. The internet is not something that's separate from us. It's something that is connected to us.
Yes.
And that's how we, as like light beings, we say this, like use this example or this metaphor, right? We're not only connected anymore with these strings of light, but by the internet. Or you could say the internet is just simply part of that interconnectedness of all things. It's not separate.
And of course, Spotify is not the internet. It's not. Wouldn't even treat it as part of.
It is an internet.
It is an internet, exactly.
That's how we need to think of it.
I'm trying to somehow find a way of bringing this to this the initial idea, because I agree with lots of it, but not with everything. But to me, I think it is interesting to me to see the results of statistical analyses. I think it's. I also, but that's maybe because I also believe in interpersonal objectivity. Or I think the combination of different subjective views, or different views, actually creates a sort of objectivity, whatever that word will mean. And I also think that I am a very, very biased observer of myself, and I think that the outside view, the combined outside view of many others, is probably more helpful than my own view of myself. I think it adds to it for sure. And maybe it's more precise than my own, because there are so many things going on in my own observation of myself that may suppress me actually understanding certain aspects of my personality, that maybe it's helpful to get the outside perspective. And I see this one sort of the positive side of it is, I think that this data-driven world, which goes completely against my my feeling that it's a good thing, it's maybe it helps me or helps us understand some things about reality which we may want to block out outside of the facts. I think I see in so many debates about art. I think the word spirituality is often used to cap the debate, because but you say no, it's a spiritual. Ultimately, machines are not spiritual, and so. But maybe in many aspects, I think what people are getting out of it, my impression, as subjective as that is that they're looking for something that is precisely not spiritual. I think they want something that hits them on a different level. I know a friend of mine uses, when she goes to work, she has a job at a bank, and but she works as an analyst, and she can basically work on her own the entire day. She puts on headphones once she enters the office, and she puts on a classical playlist, and then when she leaves, she puts off the headphones, and that's it. That's her day. And there's always music running. But of course, that's not music in a sense, and it could easily be replaced. So I think it serves a different function than when even she would be going to a concert and listening to music attentively, even the same music.
Yeah, I mean, when you say function, what you're actually really talking about is a tool, right?
Yeah.
So because the function is the secondary reason for being, let's say, of the tool, but the tool is also just the tool. So the hammer is a hammer even if you don't use it as a hammer. So that's why I think the term music is still something that is kind of like valid. So when you say it's not music, of course it's music, but it's being consumed in a different way than you would think is necessary for it to be music. Right? You know what I mean? So anyway, like it really also doesn't really matter that much. But I think what you were also saying is that so that people want something that is not spiritual. That's kind of like what you said.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And that has been driving the invention of technology. And it's been driving the invention of the hammer as well as the internet and Spotify and AI. It is the trying to, I'm using this word again, emancipate yourself from being human. And being human is the naked, is the baby, is the humanity is being born and dying after a few hours. That's what being human actually is. Being human is not what we have accomplished. Being human is that naked being that, if it's not being cared for, will die. That's what being human really is. And that's what we're going to return to. And that's when humanity will eventually cease to exist. When we're not caring about ourselves anymore, on that interpersonal level, like when we're not making those agreements. The fact that we're making those agreements also leads us where we are right now. So there's really no way out of this development. It's just, you could say, like, and this is also something that I've said for a long time, what a lot of people call human behavior is actually not inhuman behavior. Like there's like this terminology is being kind of like perverted in a way. Like is it like when you're aggressive, right? And then people say, oh yeah, you shouldn't be aggressive. You can rationalize this. You're a human being. It's exactly the opposite. Being human means to be aggressive. That's what a human is. Like the rational stuff, that is something that we were capable of putting on top of our hardware, let's say, right? But it's not what we are. And anyway, like coming back to like our music and AI generated music, it's something that was just inevitable. That's what we are going to do, even though it's not me. You cannot really stop technical innovation. That's not going to work. And so, like the chance we may have a chance to actually survive this, let's say, by getting more inhuman, right? And getting more inhuman may mean that at some point there is a way to transfer our inhumanity into a machine.
I was thinking of this on the way here on the subway, actually, in a different way. I was thinking of Taruskin in the history of music in the Western tradition, how he describes that, I think very early on, he describes the situation where one count or another had a string quartet play in front of his balcony, underneath his balcony, and while he was lying in his bed and falling asleep, to create the illusion as though the music were not being played by humans, but was actually there by itself. And that this tradition of rhythm music had to end at one point. Like Schoenberg was already coming to this weird conclusions as though maybe it doesn't have to be played anymore. Maybe it's just enough on the paper.
You see, that's not a new thing. Like the Russian constructivists, for example.
Yeah.
Like you would not paint your own painting. You would give instructions via telephone, and somebody would paint it, right? Like there's nothing new about it. Nothing new about it at all.
It's just that I mean, I think just as the more inhuman, as you would put it, we become,
exactly.
the more, the less or the more appealing it becomes to take this to the extreme.
Yes.
So in a way, I think for musicians, I think it's scary. Who are now making their living from it, and it's getting hard. But I think for many people reading the article, that future may not be scary at all.
So you see, like one of my my research projects with Kid Arrow is to create musical pieces where the structure of those musical pieces makes it harder for current traditional AI to actually extrapolate patterns, because the overall pattern of a Kid Arrow piece is always averaging out itself to nothing. Yeah, that's the idea. And as long as its pattern recognition algorithms, let's say, I can make the pattern more complicated and still canceling itself out, right? So that that kind of technology may have a hard time replicating it. Maybe it's already capable of doing it. But anyway, so like the next step would be to actually model, like I said, model the researcher, model the composer, model the actual inhuman interest. Let's say we have to put it this way now, the inhuman interest, and see what happens then. But as I said, like from the perspective of the organism, human being, right? All of this is gonna get old. It's gonna be a tool. It's gonna be available as a tool, and we may be able to utilize it or not. And this I don't know. Like,
yeah, it seems completely logical that it will go that direction. I mean, I just did an interview with the founder of a label called Made by Robots, which is sort of based on very strong involvement of AI. Probably the next, I mean, it makes sense to go to a label which is not a label for music, but for composers, like what was it, for producers. You make your producers using AI.
yes. And anyway, I mean, there's like we cannot, just like there are people who are listening to classical music, let's say, right? Or who appreciate going to a concert of classical music, of rock music, whatever, right? Like things that at least these days they have some sort of a physical reality, let's say, that like even though you can create a photograph like with a or like a large language model can generate some sort of text, but the physicality of it is sort of, how should I say this? I don't want to say it's non-existent, because you could still print out something that a large language model wrote, but there is something between the lines. I'm sorry that I have to say it this way, but there's something between the lines that right now only a certain human interaction, actually, like between human beings, is capable of generating. And that's something that we will sort of rediscover, let's just put it that way. Obviously, like you can have a chatbot and the chatbot can be your boyfriend or girlfriend, or it's possible, entirely possible, and I think it's cool even, that it's possible. However, when you rediscover that you want to be touched, let's say, and I don't mean just in a sense with words, right? Like then there needs to be something else. And so this organic biological, physical, real world sort of like interaction is going to just become more important again. And then that's going to be the next thing to exploit. And already is with dating, like these dating portals, which have been around for, I think, 25 years now. As far as I remember, in the early 2000s, there was something like that already, right? So I don't know. I don't know.
To me, also the research in a way is also the idea that you can create, as you have with Kid Arrow, huge discographies, which are so huge that it even is like if you have a Kid Arrow fan, I don't know if you have people who are really at these always present at these listening parties, support the release, that even then it's hard to spend all that much time with a release like you would maybe have done in the past. I just saw a few videos with the best of releases of 2024, where one of the reviewers said he listened to approximately 450 albums in 2024. That's actually more than one per day. And that's just for that channel, just to stay on top of things. I wonder what they said about the act of listening.
Yeah, I mean, like, I can say something about that for sure. So with something like Kid Arrow, right? What is so amazing about it is that music usually is sort of hit and miss, right? So if you like human-made music, like, or entirely human-made music, which Kid Arrow is also human-made, but the way is that I found a way to insert this element of wonder into the musical structure. So with a Kid Arrow track, you listen to it and it's a you're constantly flooded with this sense of wow. And obviously that, and I agree with you, that is getting old too, but that's what I'm exploring with this project, right? So it's not really like, and the funny thing is you can listen to these pieces over and over again and have the same sense of wow.
It's true.
But you also don't have to. You can also listen to the next piece, and it's also going to give you like a slightly different sense of wow. And I find that very interesting for me to explore as an artist, to understand that I can lift my own art, let's say, to a point where I don't need to think anymore in the terms of sort of like what the layman's idea of what an artist does, that it's always trial and error, and yeah, you're inspired, you're not inspired, blah blah blah. Like really this sort of romanticized version of what an artist does, right? And like artists or creators, like in all centuries, have always known that that's total bullshit. Like if you're creating like a beautiful statue of David, right? Like there's a lot of work in it to give people that sense of wow. And so in a way, what we're experiencing now, or what I'm experiencing for myself, is like where I'm clearly saying, like, yes, you can create all sorts of algorithms that are trying to recreate the pieces of art that come out of how shall I say, out of the process of searching or of not knowing, right? Like, but you could also go a step further, like, and I say I can rival the machine. And I think for myself, it's important to go that way, to see I can rival the machine, I can leave that behind me, and I can become more, and now I have to use the word human, not inhuman, because like what I'm doing is sort of like doing the inhuman thing, and I can become more human by exploring, by matching the machine, by trying to, not matching, trying to keep up with the machine, let's say, or by rivaling the machine in the sense of like by creating structures that with the current technology, the machine would have a hard time like recreating a whole like 90-minute Kid Arrow piece because it does not understand how it progresses. It's just too complicated. The factor analysis, which would be the term, technological term for it, in order to understand what's going on there, is just too complex.
Yeah, I think maybe I'll describe my experience as a listener, and then you can say if that actually is sort of what you're describing. Is with a lot of pop music, because I've listened to it so much, it just gets harder to get that initial trigger, that strong response, because I remember so much of it. And I think the way AIs work is that they don't forget, they just keep everything, and then they look for bigger patterns. And I think when I listen to the Kid Arrow pieces, there's only forgetting in a way. As you say, it's a continuation of moments, beautiful moments, great moments, intense moments. Actually, I think I like the new one with Eric, probably the best, actually. I think that's really beautiful. Also the sounds. I think there's some new sounds in the new series, which I really am attracted to. But I don't know if I can actually remember after 20 minutes what came at the beginning. Exactly. And that is what makes it great.
That's the whole idea.
Yeah.
Yes. So in a way, what funnily enough, coming back to the word streaming. So now, like the artist, me as the artist, I create a stream. That's what it is. So it's not anymore about like a singular release. It's about a stream. This is my stream. And I have the stream for consciousness as well.
Yeah.
And stream for consciousness is actually purely handmade, right? Like the composition is handmade, where with Kid Arrow, it's a handmade algorithm, let's say, right?
Do you think you could write these pieces without the help of the machine or your?
Yeah, of course. Of course. It's just a lot of work. And you know that ever since, like always people like composers have used techniques of permutation. It's nothing new. Like that's how you sort of like discover your voice as an artist. You have ideas, you mutate and permutate them, and you find ways of manipulating these symbols, let's say, that you've created. And like Todmorden 513 is sort of like the first Kid Arrow piece, the first big Kid Arrow piece, right? And that was still with writing. I mean, it was already like using some sort of mathematical function, but still, I had to write it down by hand, and record it actually like note by note. But with Kid Arrow, I'm like part of that idea is that all the sounds that you hear are presets, synthesizer and like sample presets, which are post-produced a little bit to make it sound more to my taste, obviously. But yeah.
Maybe in that future you're describing, we'll get the complete works of Kid Arrow performed by a small orchestra.
Yes. I mean, like the interesting thing is like for me, it's just like choosing, like, do I want to have the output could be a score, or the output could be the sound.
Yeah.
It could these days, because like obviously it's totally unrealistic to have like to record a 90-minute piece every day with an orchestra, let's say. But having just the virtual instruments like bounce down to the what used to be called hard drive, now solid state drive, right? So and then upload it into the cloud and available for people to listen to within like a couple of minutes.
Probably Daniel Ek would have the funds to get that off the ground.
Yes. I mean, like if like I said, I've been contacted by an AI researcher, so I'll see what that'll bring. But obviously, yeah, I wouldn't, in the current climate, I wouldn't mind, like I said at the beginning, like buying Spotify stock, right? You could say, oh, no, that is morally wrong. On the other hand, the things that are morally wrong are not going to go away.
Might as well benefit from it. Yeah.
Yeah, not benefit, but become sort of like a part of the circle, of that life circle, let's say, right? Because I am part of it. So if I can't extract value on one end of it, maybe I can get that on the other end. I don't know. But what I was going to say is like, even like if somebody, I know it's probably already too late, but if somebody would ask me, like, can we use your pieces and model this music or model you as a composer, like I probably would say yes. Yeah. Because there's no stopping anyway. So any offer really that gives me a little bit of turnover, let's say, right? So to feed my family and myself is appreciated.
And it would be fascinating to get that perspective, I think. It's like Jeff Mills when we talked about DJing. I think he described, he said he didn't quite believe that the experience of DJing in a live situation could be done by a machine. But he said if it would be possible, then he'd just be out of a job and that would be it. But I think he would always want to, if there were an option to actually see it happen, he would want to see it. I think he'd.
I mean, of course it's possible.
Well, it's happening on a certain level. It's possible already. Yes. It's already happening.
Yes.
It's just, I don't think.
It's just that people maybe still need to think that there is a person there doing it.
And maybe because the negative space you described, which is also very much great in DJing, or very important,
yes. Yeah, of course,
is not yet quite part of these systems.
But that's what good AI should be able to do. I think like I said, the initial, and let me say Amazon as the funny thing is, I read the other day that the very first book that was somebody bought from Amazon was a Douglas Hofstadter book.
Ah.
How
yeah.
How ironic, right?
Yeah.
But yeah.
Maybe as a closing question, the current bio, or I don't know, slogan, whatever. There's a short sentence underneath the Kidero image on Bandcamp, which says, "In this constellation, or in this group," I'm not quite sure about the translation. This constellation, the answer is yes.
Yes.
Which constellation, and what is the question?
It's about relationship, right? And in the general sense of it.
Mm-hmm.
So and this is something that I've been teaching to my students as well, is like your initial response should be yes, right? The no, or the development of the yes, let's just say that, the development of the yes is yet to be seen, but you start there. And that's what Kidero sort of like represents, is we have this constellation of notes or whatever, and what you say is yes. It's just another way of talking about my musical methods, say, or my philosophical understanding of the world, is that you're faced with a situation, and rather than fighting it, you embrace it, and you go from there. And rather than taking away from something, you're adding to it. And the first thing you can add is to say yes. And it's the same thing with our Spotify discussion. Yeah. Like, how do I fight this? How do we fight this situation? Like, there's no way. There's no way. Like how, like if your country is in a war with another country, how can you as a person, like how you can say, okay, I'm gonna go to war and I'm gonna die, or I'm gonna, you can do that, but you could also say, yes, this is the way it is. I somewhat want to survive, like maybe you don't want to survive. It's also an option, right? But then you say yes to that, right? And you go from there and you see what happens.